Just waiting for the live stream to. Okay, perfect. Now we can start.
Well, great. Good afternoon and welcome to the June 10th, 2021 meeting of the West Side Cities Coalition of Governments. And before we go around the room and in effect take the roll, Winnie, could you explain, this is a remote meeting. We don't know how many more of these we'll have remotely, but it is operating under special rules. How do people who wish to make public comment do so?
If they go to the agenda on the very second page or on page 4, it outlines the instructions for public comments. Either they can use the Q&A function or raise their hand as an attendee. And then if they're dialing in, there is some instructions on what number to use for that.
Okay, great. Thank you. I want the public to know how they can participate. We've been called to order now, and we'll go around the room and do introductions, and this will also double as the roll call. So when you introduce yourself, if you would, if you are the voting delegate for your jurisdiction, please specify that so that can be entered onto the record. And I'll start. My name's Kevin McKeown. I'm a Santa Monica City Council member and the chair of the COG. And I might as well mention this now because it'll come up in the course of the meeting. This will probably be the last meeting I ever chair as an elected official. Last month, I announced my retirement from the Santa Monica City Council, which becomes effective tomorrow. And I don't have any meetings tomorrow, so this may be it. Let's go around the room, and it's hard to know how to go around the room when we're all on a screen and see different people. Let's go alphabetically with Beverly Hills first.
Hi, I'm Mayor Bob Wunderlich of Beverly Hills, and we're going alphabetical by city name, not by person name, because I'm always last, or usually last when we go by person name. But I am a voting member. And Kevin, I didn't realize that you were retiring from city council also. So I think we'll have moments later to express our thanks to you. But as a holding place, thanks to you for all that you've done for so long.
Thank you. Culver City.
Hi, Mayor Alex Fish. I'm the voting delegate, and Councilmember McKeown, I'd simply urge that you have more than 24 hours to reconsider your decision.
I think CI comes before CO, so Los Angeles City. Is anybody here for Los Angeles City?
I am here, Debbie Diner Harris from Councilmember Paul Koretz's office.
Jay Greenstein, also from Councilmember Paul Koretz's office.
Anybody here for Mike Bonham? Not yet. Okay, LA County. Nobody here yet? And I know West Hollywood's in the house.
Yes, hi. I am Mayor Pro Tem Lauren Meister, representing the city of West Hollywood. And I would like to congratulate you on retirement. That's an exciting thing. So we will miss you, but all the best on that.
So now let's hear from the COG staff and then other people who are here for the meeting. And I'm not even going to try to put you all in order. Just, raise your hand or start to talk. Cecilia, why don't you start?
I'm happy to start. Cecilia Estelano, Executive Director of the West Side Cities COG. And Kevin, I'm very sad and have been for a while now. So I'm just going to put that on the record. Yeah, I'm going to go with, let's go to Riley next and followed by Winnie.
Hello, this is Riley O'Brien, analyst with the West Side Cities COG. I'm also sad to see Councilmember McKeown go. Thank you so much for your service, and I'll pass it over to Winnie.
Hello, this is Winnie with the West Side Cities Council of Governments. I also third that. I'm really sad, but happy for you as well. And I will turn it. Lauren, have you gone yet?
Yeah, don't worry, Winnie. I'll get you that Form 700.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, it's
Hi,
Green.
Lauren Langer, Counselor for the COG. And Councilmember McKeown, I enjoyed working with you too, so I will miss working with you. Best of luck.
Hi, it's Colleen Davis from Santa Monica. I'm the alternate. And if you think you're all sad, imagine how I am, because I'm stuck on the Santa Monica City Council without Kevin. We are going to miss him desperately, his wise counsel, his institutional knowledge, and most importantly, his ability to craft the most clever puns in the world. But he will be sorely missed, not just here at the COG, but on the City Council.
Apologies for the alarm in the background, but I'm Stephanie Venegas with the City of Santa Monica. And Kevin, I'll save my niceties for you one-on-one. Can't believe I now am here longer and you won't be here anymore.
So this is Julian Gold, council member from Beverly Hills. I'm just here as an observer today. But Kevin, I did want to wish you well in whatever comes next. Your service, your public service over decades has been appreciated in so many different venues. Really, a lot of people have a lot to thank you for. So congratulations on a job well done.
Good afternoon, Anuj Gupta, also with the City of Santa Monica. Thank you, Kevin. We are all going to miss you here, you know, on the dais in our community. But we know you're not leaving town, and we will look forward to seeing you around.
This is Shelley Wolfberg. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Shelley.
Oh, sorry. This is Shelley Wolfberg, City of Culver City. And Councilmember McEwen, I think I remember at least one trip to Sacramento for a league conference, and just remembering that time, and appreciate your leadership, and it's been great working with you, and I wish you all the best for a long, prosperous, healthy retirement. Thank you.
Cindy Owens, Policy and Management Analyst with the City of Beverly Hills, and Councilmember McEwen. You're one of the first people I remember meeting at my very first COG meeting. You were very warm and very welcoming, and I cannot say thank you enough for that. You will be missed.
Hernan Molina, City of West Hollywood, and Dito for everything that everyone has said to you, Kevin McKeown. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Helen Chun, City of Culver City. Councilmember McEwen, congratulations on your retirement. Just in time for summer.
You know, thank you. I really didn't mean to start the meeting out with a tribute. It was just the roll call, but I thought you needed to know because some of the items on the agenda have to do with my leaving and being replaced. But thank you all very much. It's probably just as well we're getting this out of the way because we've got a lot of business to do today. How many people are there who still have not identified themselves? I see at least a few.
Yes, we're done with the city staff. We still have some from SCAG. So
we need, this is Diana with Diana Chen with Culver City. Kevin, I just want to say thank you. Really appreciate your leadership, and you will be missed.
I see 3 hands up, so I assume that they want to identify themselves. From Metro, from SCAG, and Rachel, I don't know who your dog is or if he's from.
Hi, sorry, this is Rachel Cheryl, and I'm with Supervisor Kuehl. I'm here for Fernando Morales. And yes, that is my dog, Moose. Thank you.
Hi, this is Sarah Patterson with SCAG, and I just actually wanted to mention that I will miss you, Councilmember McEwen, but also I think you have one of the best Zoom meeting voices. So I will greatly miss the tenor of your voice. I think it makes for a pleasant and lovely meeting. So we shall miss you, but I specifically will miss hearing the sound of your voice during these meetings. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
This is Mayon Johnson from SCAG, and I have not been joining your meetings, but I wanted to wish you congratulations.
And hi, everyone. This is Bob Chung from West Hollywood. Patrick Chandler with LA Metro. Thank you.
That is the last hand I saw up, and that may.
This is Councilmember Göran Eriksson, alternate Culver City. I asked them to change my name on the screen.
Yeah, throw that refund. Okay, I apologize. It's probably the longest roll call we've ever had. And we do have a big agenda. Winnie, were you able to identify all the voting delegates, and are we confident now that we know who's here?
Yes, and we have a quorum.
Last call for anybody who didn't speak up. I don't see any. So we'll move on to item 3 on the agenda, and that's the Executive Director's Report.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember McEwen. In addition to us having the departure of our fine chair, Kevin McEwen, we also note that Francie Steffen from Santa Monica, who's really been critical in our transportation working group, is also moving on. We have, I'm just going to take the prerogative of the executive director just to say this, that let's recognize the fact that Kevin McEwen was one of the founding members of the COG, was really a pivotal person in creating this body decades ago. Certainly since we've been the executive director, we have benefited from his strong and steady hand, from his sense of regionalism, from his sense of the importance of not only good governance and open leadership and open meetings, but also the notion of comedy among colleagues on the West Side, and comedy in his use of clever puns. But also I want to say he's been such a tremendous leader on issues related to affordable housing, transportation, the environment. And it's just been a true pleasure to work with him. So I will miss you tremendously. I've had the great pleasure of working closely with you through your different tenures as chair of the board or president of the board. So this is definitely a change. It's the end of an era. So I want to thank you for your great service to not just the people of Santa Monica, but the people of the West Side. So thank you. And with that, I have to say that we have a couple of positions as a result of Kevin's departure and Francie's departure that we want to solicit interest in. And that is first, the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission. As you'll note on the agenda, we're going to have a discussion about some business before them, but Councilmember McEwen has been our COG representative on that board. So we will need to solicit interest on folks who would like to serve as the COG representative on that very, very important body. As well, Francie Steffen has been the alternate to me on the Metro Policy Advisory Council. And that's has been an important role. So we invite members and staff members who are interested in serving on the PAC to please submit a letter of interest to Winnie. We'd like to get those by July 30th, 2021, and then we will agendize the appointments for those two positions. So for the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission, it would likely be a member of the COG or a council member from one of the cities. And for the PAC, likely a staff member from one of the transportation, we imagine transportation departments in our members. So any questions on that?
I just want to note, if I can, Cecilia, that with respect to the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission, my alternate already determined is Mayor Fish of Culver City. Right. So he will be representing the COG, and we represent the Bayona watershed cities. That's our seat on that commission at the next meeting at least. So we are covered for continuity, and I hope that Mayor Fish will apply for the permanent position.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. So that is really kind of my executive director's report. We can move on to the next item, which is around SB 35.
And we have some information to be presented to us by SCAG. And Mayan, is that how you pronounce your first name? Mayan?
Yes, Mayan.
Mayan, take it away.
All right, great, thank you. I do have a presentation, PowerPoint, because no SCAG presentation is complete without one. So bear with me for a minute while I load that up.
And Mayan, while you're doing that, let me provide a little bit of context. We are having this presentation at the request of Mayor Pro Tem Lauren Meister to try to understand the impacts of SB 35, which was passed in 2017 and triggers affordable housing streamlined approval requirements if jurisdictions do not meet their RHNA goals. We have quite a bit of information in your agenda packet, and Mayan is going to provide us some information and any questions you may have. Take it away.
Great. Well, thank you for inviting me today to your meeting. I'm Mayan Johnson, Housing Program Manager at SCAG. I've been here 15 years. That covers 3 RHNA cycles. But sometimes I don't consider myself an expert because I myself am always learning something new about RHNA. So I will try my best to still answer your questions, but let's get started. So my presentation is focused on the consequences of not meeting RHNA. But I'll spend a couple minutes in the last few slides just to go over SB 35 because that is seen as one of the consequences of not meeting RHNA. But in the end, it's SB 35 doesn't actually affect RHNA itself. It's actually, or sorry, RHNA doesn't affect SB 35. It's just one way to help jurisdictions or ensure that jurisdictions can meet RHNA. But I'll get into that towards the end. So when we talk about meeting RHNA, you'll hear from different perspectives, different definitions of meeting RHNA. The one is actually the basic minimum for all jurisdictions, and that's housing element compliance. We know a lot of jurisdictions are going to face challenges this cycle because the RHNA allocation was so high this time around, 1.34 million for the SCAG region. But housing element compliance, if you don't meet RHNA, a lot of people use housing element non-compliance as a proxy for that definition. So I'll get into that. And then the second way of not meeting RHNA would be not issuing enough permits. So that's measured by building activity. So the first one is more on the planning end of not meeting RHNA. And then the second definition is not enough building activity measured through permits. So those who need a quick refresher, who've tried to stay away from this as much as possible, housing element review and adoption process. So it's required that all jurisdictions have to update their housing element with their RHNA allocation, and they have to show this through site and zoning analysis. So every 8 years, they have to update their housing element, and then they submit a draft to HCD for review and approval. Obviously, the hope is that they review it, and then they approve it, and you can adopt. But especially with such a high number this cycle in comparison to last cycles, we do and there's a lot more constraints and requirements for what can constitute a site, how you can obtain credit towards RHNA. We do anticipate that a lot of jurisdictions will have to go through at least one revision based on those comments from HCD on the draft. So jurisdictions will have to go through that. The deadline to get a compliant housing element for, let's say, grants is October 15th. So we call that the housing element due date. But depending on the situation, for example, it could just be adoption of your housing element by this date, but other requirements have it that you have to have a compliant housing element by the due date. So there are some nuances associated with that date. But officially, the law says that you must revise your housing element and adopt by October 15th. There is a way you can adopt without any changes, but we don't really recommend that. And if you decide to go that route, you probably should check with your local legal your jurisdiction's legal counsel, but we don't really, that's not ideal. We hopefully, as you go along, develop your housing elements, that you consider the comments from HCD if you have to change it, and then you adopt after all you make those changes and submit another draft. So the basic minimums for housing elements, they have to be adopted by your jurisdiction and submitted to HCD by October 15th. There's also other things such as including zoning for emergency shelters, which is separate from your RHNA allocation. But then there's, of course, accommodating RHNA through sites and zoning and programs. And even after you adopt, many jurisdictions a cycle, because the number is higher, will have to do rezoning, and that has to be done within 3 years of adoption. So if these aren't met, you could be considered out of compliance. You're not meeting your RHNA through your housing element. So for example, zoning for emergency shelters, there are some provisions. Obviously, That doesn't have to do with your RENA allocation, but you could be considered out of compliance if you didn't have that provision and the requirements in your housing element. So you can still fall out of compliance for reasons not directly related to the RENA allocation. Good news is that for the 5th cycle, so that's what's going to end in October, is when the 6th cycle housing elements are due. There's only 5 SCAG jurisdictions that have an out of compliant housing element. So that's good news for our region. We hope for the 6th cycle, we know there's going to be challenges, but we hope that all of our jurisdictions at some point can attain compliance and adoption, because there are going to be implications of that if they don't. So what happens if you don't have a compliant housing element? So one thing that does come up a lot, and some jurisdictions see this as a grace period, but SCAG, we see it more as a consequence. So because of SB 375 about a decade ago, jurisdictions that don't adopt a housing element. So the law doesn't actually say it has to be compliant, but again, we encourage compliance before adoption. But if you don't adopt a housing element within that 120 days of the October 15th deadline, so February 2022, then the jurisdiction is required to revert to a 4-year housing element instead of an 8-year housing element. So that is a consequence of this. We don't recommend jurisdictions look at this as a grace period because, for example, SB2 funds or PLHA, the applications are due December 31st. And so that deadline right now is based on the October 15th deadline and doesn't consider February 2022. So if you were considering applying for that, calling it a grace period doesn't really do you any favors because you would not be eligible to apply. You would just be exempt from a 4-year housing element if you get it in, but you couldn't apply or be eligible for SB2 funding if you were planning to. So just something to keep in mind as you look at the different deadlines. There's also carryover of units from the prior cycle. So the rezoning, if you have committed to that in your housing element, if you don't do it, or if you don't do it by the deadline, it's considered unmet need. So that can be carried over into your next RENA cycle. So it would be planning for 2 planning cycles at once in your one housing element. Most jurisdictions from the 5th cycle, they don't have this issue. But it is something to keep in mind that you can end up with twice as much RENA allocation than just what you were assigned for that cycle. So again, these are just, if you're in non-compliance for various reasons, these are some of the consequences. And as I mentioned before, the ineligibility for funding opportunities. Luckily for LEAP, the deadline has already passed for that, but it was not a requirement to have a housing element compliance. For some SCAG grants, such as the SCP Sustainable Communities Program, that was also not a requirement. But SB2 and a few other grants have certain deadlines. And so the October 15th deadline is what the state looks at for having a compliant housing element. Some do have it, so it's at the deadline for applying for that funding. So you could consider a grace period for that funding, but again, it's still October 15th. And then, of course, there's legal action. So jurisdictions that don't have a compliant housing element could be subject to legal challenges from stakeholders or HCD. So a court can require by right enforcement if deemed necessary for that to ensure that your housing element is in compliance. So a lot of jurisdictions, I imagine the by right process is very cumbersome. It does take away a lot of local power and decision-making with land use. So again, it's a consequence of not meeting or having a compliant housing element or adopted. There's also a no net loss rule. So this was passed in recent years. It has been on the books with HCD administratively, but this is new for legislation in the past few years. So one of these restrictions, this is how you can fall out of compliance even if you had one by October 15th and adopted. So jurisdictions at all times have to have enough sites to accommodate the RENA throughout the planning period. So an example of this is, let's say you have a RENA of 100 units, or you're assigned 100 units for very low income. And let's say that you developed a parcel and rather than you developed a parcel that can accommodate somehow all 100 units, but you downzoned it to 80 units, and that's what was built. You still have on the books a requirement of 20 extra units that you have to find sites for. So you may have built 80 very low income units, but you still have a 20 unit deficit. So if you did not plan for those 20 already somewhere else in your city, you are considered out of compliance until you can find those sites, 20 sites. I think HCD has some flexibility on the time you have to be able to find those sites, rezone as needed, but you are still considered out of compliance by a certain time. So just make sure that at all times, while you have a compliant housing element, if you end up not zoning for enough sites when you get applications, that you still can accommodate your RENA allocation, because again, it can fall out of compliance. And this can also lead to legal action. So stakeholders can challenge your jurisdiction on your zoning practices throughout the housing element cycle. And HCD can also rescind your housing element compliance status. This happened to the city of Huntington Beach, I believe in 2016. A stakeholder had taken them to court, arguing that they did not have enough sites because they downzoned one area of their specific plan. And it ended up going through the courts, and HCD actually rescinded the housing element compliance status for the city of Huntington Beach for the first time in HCD's history. So we do say this is like the poster child of that. We don't want that to happen to any jurisdiction, but we do want to make sure that you're mindful that you do have to maintain housing element compliance throughout the entire 8-year period. So October 15th is a good day to aim for, but make sure your entire 8 years that you are in compliance with all of these requirements. So this brings me to SB 35. So we talked about I talked about planning, your planning requirements, the basic minimum. But not meeting RENA can also be measured by how many permits you're issuing or not issuing enough of. So SB 35 was passed in 2017 by Senator Wiener. And there's two parts to it. And I noticed in the agenda today, there's a handy flow chart that you can look at. And it's a requirement that basically you can bypass the permitting process, the discretionary permitting process in a jurisdiction if both the jurisdiction where the project is located, if they qualify under SB 35, and if the project itself qualifies. So for example, if the jurisdiction has permitted enough units for income categories, it is exempt from SB 35, so the project can't apply for it, even if the project qualifies in another jurisdiction. So for SB 35, SCAG sees this, while we understand it can take away from the discretionary permitting process, it is seen by the state and by SCAG as not including barriers to housing development when there's permitting activity. So for example, SB 35 applies in jurisdictions that don't issue enough permits as measured by HCD or that do not submit an annual progress report. So the measurement for not issuing enough permits is halfway at the beginning, halfway, and at the end of the cycle. So for example, the 6th cycle will start October 15th of this year. HCD will measure your progress 4 years from that point. So in 2025, HCD will review all of the permits you've reported in your APR to them, and then determine whether or not you will be subject to SB 35 for the 6th cycle planning period. So what you have now, if you are not exempt from SB 35, they've measured that from your 5th housing element and your progress reports. So the 6th cycle, while the numbers are higher, that won't take place until about 4 years from now. So just something to keep in mind. It's not like if you haven't issued enough permits for your 6th cycle, that doesn't take into effect until 2025. And they'll measure that again at the end of the 6th cycle. So in 2029, they'll compare to 100% of your 6th cycle RENA allocation. So it's not quite right away. Right now, you're still being measured to your 5th RENA cycle allocation. So by streamlining the permitting process, this is also done by income category, except for moderate income, curiously. That has actually always been there. They measure it for your progress for above moderate and also for low and very low, but moderate income is not included in that progress. But what it does, it allows a developer, if they want to pursue a ministerial permit instead of a discretionary one. So they don't have to go to a city council. It doesn't have to have, I believe it's a CEQA exemption from this, but it is a streamlined permitting process. On the project end, if a jurisdiction does qualify or is subject to SB 35, the project has a lot of requirements in it. And rather than going through everyone individually, I just picked out some of the highlights. So obviously the site has to be zoned as residential or mixed use residential. It has to be it can't be subject to certain environmental constraints. So it can't be next to a Superfund site, for instance. It has to include a percentage of affordable housing depending on the income category that the jurisdiction is lacking in for permits. And then one thing that I keep hearing from developers on why they're not applying for SB 35 is that the project also has to pay prevailing wage. So this one project may qualify for all of these, but I hear developers have problems meeting that last requirement. So that is, it's not something that is applied all the time. A lot of developers are choosing not to apply for SB 35, even though their project may qualify. But again, it's optional if they want to apply for that. And there's of course probably various reasons why they would or would not. So really in a nutshell, it's not that RENA affects SB 35, but rather that SB 35 has been on the books. And because the number is so much higher this cycle, we do imagine that a lot of jurisdictions, there's only really a small handful that are exempt according to the 5th cycle allocation, but we don't anticipate many jurisdictions meeting the RENA because the number is so high. And we understand there may be other conditions. It may not be the fault of the jurisdiction, but SB 35 is still in the books to ensure that it can accelerate housing production through streamlining. So other than SB 35, when it comes to not meeting RENA through not permitting enough units, there really aren't any other consequences in state housing law if you don't permit enough units. I mean, it's kind of good news if you're a jurisdiction, you're struggling to even find these sites. And there may be things such as market conditions that are out of your control. But I did want to point out, historically, there have been attempts to link permitting and building activity to funding that jurisdictions are entitled to receive. A couple attempts in past few years have been actually trying to link state level funding, such as SB 1 funds for fixing your roads, to actually meeting RENA goals. Those have been opposed by SCAG and many other stakeholders and organizations in the past. But I wouldn't be surprised if at the legislative level that these issues do keep arising. So it is something we do monitor, but right now, at least for the time being, there aren't any penalties if you don't permit enough housing to linking that to your building activity. So with that, I'd be more than happy to take any questions that you have. I know it's a lot of information, but I do appreciate the opportunity to provide this information that we can be of service and help our jurisdictions meet their housing goals. Thank you.
Thank you, because regular attendees know that we don't ordinarily have long presentations, but that had so much information that is of crucial importance to us right now. I'm sure mine is not the only city where some constituents are saying, we really don't want to share our neighborhoods with new people. Why don't you just blow off the RENA numbers and go ahead without? So it's good to have that. And I've already in the chat off to the side with Winnie and others arranged that presentation will be posted on the COG website and made available to our cities, because I think many of us may find that useful as we work on our housing element, which is right on top of us at the moment. So obviously there are going to be some questions. I would just caution that we have a limited time in the meeting and much yet on the agenda. But I see a question first from Mayor Wunderlich.
Thank you. And thank you for that presentation. So I understand that if you're not currently subject to streamlining, then you would not be subject until 2025 for the 6th cycle. But then the language that I think you said was that if you do not issue enough permits or do not submit an annual progress report. And so is that an either or? If you do submit an annual progress report, then Is it not measured by whether or not you're submitting issuing enough building permits?
Oh, and I'm glad you brought that up. And my apologies if I misspoke. So if you don't issue an AP, or if you don't submit all of your APRs, you are automatically streamlined or automatically subject to SB 35. But then the second measurement after that, after they review your APR, is did you issue enough permits? If yes, then you're exempt. But if no, then you will still be subject to SB 35. So you have to clear both.
And what constitutes enough permits?
Yeah, so halfway through the cycle, HCD will look at and see if you've met halfway through your 6-cycle allocation. And then at the end of the cycle, they'll look at it at 100%. So it's prorated, but it's only every 4 years.
Okay, thank you.
Pro Tem Meister.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the presentation. I asked for this because we are all in the middle of writing our housing elements for the 6th cycle, and there were some things that I learned that I was not aware of before, and I figured maybe some of my colleagues were not either. One of the things you brought up, Mayan, is that that if you didn't meet your numbers in the 5th cycle, they would carry over to the 6th cycle. Does it work on the other side that if you had in excess of your numbers, can they count towards your numbers for the 6th cycle?
Unfortunately, the answer is no. We do understand a lot of jurisdictions went above and beyond, but there isn't anything where you can apply a credit from prior cycles to a current cycle.
Okay. Thank you. And then I have just 2 more questions. One is what I learned also in doing the housing element this cycle is that apparently there's a minimum and a maximum on the acreage size that can be applied towards the units. So in other words, for the sites that you're picking for affordable housing, it has to be greater than X acreage and less than X acreage. Are you familiar with that?
I wouldn't be able to get into the details, the ins and outs of what could constitute or what you could get credited for affordable housing. But I will say it has gotten a lot harder in the past few years because there have been a lot more bills that have put constraints on what can count for affordable housing or just counting towards your housing element in general.
And I do know that there is an acreage requirement, which for a city that's very built out, like the city of West Hollywood, really makes it difficult to pick sites. The last item that I was going to ask about is my understanding is if you listed something in, if you listed a site in the 5th cycle or in a previous cycle, and they did not develop on that site, and you list it again, then that site development ends up being by right. Are you familiar with that?
What I am familiar with, I believe if for 2 consecutive cycles, so let's say the 4th and 5th cycle, you've included the site in your housing element, you can't include it in your 6th cycle, even if it's available, unless you do an extra analysis on top of that. Because HCD may be wondering why this site, are you putting up barriers to, or something, is something wrong with the site? It's a Superfund site. So they do want more analysis if you include sites that have not, that are still vacant after 2 consecutive cycles.
Thank you so much.
Well, I can no longer see the presentation, but did the last page include contact information for follow-up questions?
My apologies that it actually didn't. So you're not imagining anything anyway. I will also be out starting Monday for a few months for parental leave. But if you email housing@scag.ca.gov, we do have other staff who will be able to answer questions.
Well, congratulations on the parental leave.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't see any questions at the moment. There is a way to follow up on this, and we do have 5 action items to get to. Is there any burning question somebody has to have answered right now today? I don't see a hand. So we'll thank you very much. That was a tremendously useful presentation. And I'm sure that getting that in the hands of our planners and others in our communities will be a big help as we move forward. So again, thank you very much. We'll move on to our 5 items, our action items for today. And we'll start with an easy one. That's the approval of the minutes of our last meeting. So has everyone had a chance to look at those minutes? And does anybody have any alteration that they would like to make to the minutes? If not, the chair would entertain a motion to adopt the minutes from the last meeting.
Make the motion.
Second?
Okay, moved by West Hollywood, seconded by Beverly Hills to adopt the the minutes as submitted for the April 8th meeting of the COG. And if we'll do a roll call vote, please, Winnie.
City of Beverly Hills,
Yes.
City of Culver City,
Yes.
City of Santa Monica,
Yes.
City of West Hollywood.
Yes.
And that's it.
Minutes are adopted by unanimous vote of the COG. Thank you. Item 5B is a bunch of fiscal actions. We'll take them one at a time. And the first is the adoption of the annual work plan. Cecilia, I assume you'll be doing that.
I'll present that, and that starts on page 18 of your agenda packet. We are proposing to continue our activities from our previous cycle. So obviously it's focusing on transportation, housing, affordable housing issues, and homelessness, but also keeping some flexibility to jump on issues as they may arise. You'll see that we've detailed the types of strategic transportation initiatives we're taking a look at, some of the homelessness work that we propose, et cetera, and then the basic administrative actions like filing your Form 700s. So happy to take any questions about the work plan.
In looking that over, it appeared to me that was completely congruent with the direction you've been getting from the members of this COG over the past year. Does anybody have any questions or suggested alterations to that annual work plan? I'll see none. The chair will entertain a motion to adopt it.
So moved, Culver City.
Okay, I heard it moved by Culver City. Who was the second? Was that Beverly Hills?
And so I'll second Bob Wonderlich, Beverly Hills.
Okay, so it's moved by Culver City, seconded by Beverly Hills. I see no further request for discussion. So Winnie, please, a roll call vote.
City of Beverly Hills,
Yes.
City of Culver City,
Yes.
City of Santa Monica,
Yes.
and City of West Hollywood.
Yes.
Good work plan adopted unanimously. So we'll move on now to 5B subsection 2. And here I just want to take a privilege as chair to point out that I've been involved with this COG, as Winnie, as Cecilia said, for I think 20 years. I think it was 2001. I was Mayor Pro Tem of Santa Monica at the time when we first began talking about organizing a COG on the west side. I think it was a couple of years after that that we formally began operations. During that time, I've never seen the COG as efficiently run as it has been by Cecilia and her team. So I just want to say I am strongly supportive as I leave of handing this over again to Cecilia to manage, because I know it'll be in good hands and that makes it easier for me to say goodbye. So I'll be supporting this. Is there any questions or discussion on the extension of this contract?
I would move to extend.
I will second. So that is moved by West Hollywood and seconded by Santa Monica. And I see no further discussion. So Winnie, please, a roll call.
City of Beverly Hills,
Yes.
City of Culver City,
Yes.
City of Santa Monica,
Yes.
and City of West Hollywood.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, so that contract is adopted by a unanimous vote of all the COG members present. That moves us on to subsection 3. Now, of course, to be transparent and accountable, we have to be audited, and this is about the audit. Cecilia, can you explain any detail on this that we might need to know?
Yes, this is a little bit different. So it's difficult to, so typically what we do is we alternate every 3 years the city that takes on the role of overseeing our work as our treasurer, right? Right now we're in the cycle of Beverly Hills being our treasurer. And what we've done in the past is try to use the auditing firm that the city uses. In this case, the auditing firm that the city of Beverly Hills uses, our work is too small for them. They don't typically audit entities as small as ours. So we've been working with the firm called CLA. They were recently acquired. They were really White, Nelson, Dale, and Evans, but they were recently acquired by CLA. And they have proposed to raise their fees by $5,000 to $12,000 a year. So we wanted to note that it's a significant increase in expenditure, but we also want to note that it's difficult to find an auditing firm to do this work for us because we're small, we don't have a lot to do, a lot of activities. So we're paying, higher fees than we typically would. So we have proposed to continue on with them because for the continuity's sake, there's an argument to be made, but we're also cognizant of the increased price. So if the board saw fit, we could try to do another procurement. We just want to be honest with you all that it's hard to get somebody to do this work for us at a cheap price, to be honest with you.
So Cecilia, what I'm hearing is that there probably are no realistic alternatives.
Not really.
And $5,000 difference in the big picture of our total budget, what percentage is that?
Oh my goodness. And we've saved a ton of money last year by not having in-person meetings. So we're actually quite ahead on our budget.
Okay, so we can pay this with all the lunches we didn't eat over the past year?
Pretty much, yeah. We can pretty much eat the cost of it from the lunches.
Now you're making the pun. See, this is why I want to hand it over to somebody I trust. Any questions on this? Any concerns about the extra 5,000? And if not, I will entertain a motion to do it. Lauren.
Thank you. I don't have a big concern about it, except that I just wonder if you tried any of the auditors that our cities use that might be interested in doing it because they do the audits for one of our cities.
Yeah, that's what we've done in the past. And actually we got the previous firm did it for us kind of on the slide because the city asked them to, but at this point, nobody's taking on this work at that same firm anymore. So yeah, I mean, we're happy to look if there's a member city that thinks it could kind of finagle this for us to try to get one of their contractors to take this on, we'd certainly be open to it. And Winnie, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I believe we went back to our previous treasurer, which was West Hollywood, and I believe CLA is the auditor for your city. And if we were, according to the our correspondence with them, we would see some cost savings if CLA is doing the same audit with the city.
But our current treasurer is actually Beverly Hills right now.
Yes.
And what is the time value on this? I mean, the audit has to be done within a certain time frame. How much up against it are we?
According to the treasurer, we would need to engage with an auditor now around this time. I could check and see. He's unfortunately not on this call. If we could extend it, but this will only be for this fiscal year.
And we don't have another meeting for 2 months. So I heard a suggestion that perhaps one of the other cities could step up and do that. Is anybody stepping up and volunteering to do that, to commit their city to trying to take this on? Because if not, I think we're going to have to move this forward. Well, I don't see any volunteers. So
looks like
we couldn't commit as of
I'm
today,
sorry,
so.
Mayor Pro Tem Meister, your hand is overlaid on your logo there. No, you're waving me off?
That was left over.
Leftover hand. In that case, I will move the terms of engagement with CLA for the audit.
And I'll second.
I think that was Culver City.
No, that was Bob from Beverly Hills.
I'm sorry, Bob. Okay. So it's moved by Santa Monica and seconded by Culver City. I see no further discussion, so Winnie, you can call the roll.
City of Beverly Hills.
Yes.
Culver City.
Yes.
Santa Monica.
Yes.
And West Hollywood.
Yes.
Okay, that is approved unanimously of all the COG members who were present. That takes us to the end of our action items. And I hope you all brought your checkbooks today, because this is about the annual dues. The good news is we're not planning to change them. So they're probably already baked into your city budgets. Any further information, Cecilia, on this that the COG members would need to know to be able to make an informed vote?
If you look on the bottom of page 39, which is the fiscal year budget, the roll up, you'll see that our net assets in excess of our reserve requirements are now $197,000, principally because of all the cost savings from last year's pandemic, or from the pandemic last year. So we're in a very, very good fiscal situation.
Okay, same price as last year. Such a deal. What do you think? Anybody want to move it?
I'll move it. West Hollywood.
Moved by West Hollywood.
Culver City seconds.
And Culver City pulls out its checkbook to second. All right, any discussion? Winnie, roll call vote, please.
Beverly Hills,
Yes.
Culver City,
Yes.
Santa Monica,
Yes.
and West Hollywood.
Yes.
Okay, folks, spending the big bucks by unanimous vote. So that is approved. The fees, the dues per city will remain the same as they were last year. And this time you get lunch. So it's actually a better deal going forward. We'll move on now to more action items. Action item 5C is the election of the board officers for the next fiscal year. And the way we traditionally do this is we go through seat by seat, make nominations, vote, and then move on to the next seat. The people who are elected today will take their offices effective with our next meeting. The current officers will see us through today. So as the current chair, I would like to nominate for my successor as chair of the West Side Cities Council of Governments, the city of Beverly Hills, as represented by Bob Wunderlich. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, I will call for a vote by acclamation, but we have to, because it's COVID, we have to do a vote by acclamation by roll call, which, go figure. Winnie?
Hang on, I'm checking. I think the next rotation might be West Hollywood, not Beverly Hills. Sorry about that.
I am basing this on an email I got from you dated June 7th, Winnie.
Yes, I think I made a mistake on that.
Okay.
Because if you look at page 4,
take the egg off my face. Thank you.
Sorry.
In my motion, and instead, as the departing chair of the West Side COG, I'll nominate as the incoming chair for the next year, the city of West Hollywood, as represented by Vice Mayor Lauren Meister. Are there any other nominations? Okay, so we'll return to the acclamation situation, which requires a roll call vote.
Beverly Hills,
Yes.
Culver City,
Yes.
Santa Monica,
Yes.
and West Hollywood.
Yes.
Congratulations, Lauren. You can put your heart back down in your throat now. Sorry about that. Just you can't trust everything you read these days. What can I tell you?
I was actually going to second Bob.
So we've settled the chair for the next year. We have to move on now to who will be the vice chair.
Yes, I'd like to make a nomination. I'd like to nominate Bob Wunderlich from Beverly Hills.
Are there any other nominations? Well, I think we can do this by acclamation, but again, this being COVID, every vote's a roll call vote. So, Winnie?
Beverly Hills,
Yes.
Culver City,
Yes.
Santa Monica,
Yes.
and West Hollywood.
Yes.
And there's one more seat to determine. That is done by unanimous vote by acclamation. There's one more seat, and that is the secretary.
Yes, and I think it's my turn to nominate Mayor Fish as secretary.
And are there any other nominations for the secretary? I think we have here another acclamation, and we'll do a roll call on it. Thanks, COVID.
Beverly Hills,
Yes.
Culver City,
Yes.
Santa Monica,
Yes.
and West Hollywood.
Yes.
And that is now settled by unanimous vote of the COG. So to the new team, the new officers of this COG, congratulations. Good luck in the year ahead. I hope that at some point during your reign, we'll be able to do votes of acclamation by acclamation and not have to take roll call, because we'll no longer be meeting remotely. So you'll actually, be in one room and be able just to cheer instead of have to take roll call votes. Thank you for that. We have now got our new board for the next year. They will again be taking their seats at our next meeting, which will be in August. And with that, we move on yet again to another action item. This is 5D, the Metro Unfunded Strategic Project List. Cecilia, what's that?
Thanks, Kevin. I'm going to move quickly through this because you saw it before, but essentially this is a list that we want to submit to Metro. We gave you a draft at our last meeting in April, but we worked with the Transportation Working Group to finalize this list of unfunded strategic projects that we hope Metro may be able to fund if available, if more money comes down like manna from heaven from the federal government. So we built this list via the mobility study, as well as the Measure M multi-year sub-regional program list. You've seen it again, you've seen it before, but this would just be to finalize it and submit it to Metro in time for them to consider it into their budget.
So at this point, unless there are questions, I take it all you need is an affirmative vote from us to go ahead.
Correct, and then we can submit it.
I'll move that we do so.
Oh, I did. Sorry, there is actually a public comment on this item. It was alerted to us over email.
The motion is rescinded, and we'll now open the public hearing on this item.
Okay.
So, I will announce it is for Kevin Burton. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Hello, board members. My name is Kevin Burton. I'm a resident of West Hollywood and a member of the West Hollywood and LA County Bicycle Coalitions. I just wanted to briefly thank the Council of Governments for assembling and forwarding this strategic project list of very worthy active transportation projects to Metro to not only influence its planning efforts, but hopefully, as was mentioned, result in some funding coming via Metro to the member cities to implement these projects. The Council of Governments is particularly well positioned to work with interjurisdictional projects, of which there are several in this list, because I think they can help grease the wheels where multiple jurisdictions, multiple cities might be involved. And on the topic of interjurisdictional cooperation, I just wanted to draw the COG's attention to the fact that the local Caltrans district is also working on their active transportation plan. They have a public survey available on their website, getting comment on all the state routes that go through District 7, many of which are in the COG's area, including Venice Boulevard, Lincoln Boulevard, Sepulveda, Topanga Canyon, and State Route 2, Santa Monica Boulevard. So I hope that the COG will engage with Caltrans on what will be interjurisdictional projects coming by via their good offices. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Riley, do we have any other calls?
No, that is the only one where I see a hand raised or that was sent over email.
Okay, so that'll close the public comments on that item. And Representative Meister, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to thank staff for adding Fountain Avenue and Santa Monica Boulevard in West Hollywood to this list. Appreciate it.
Do you like it enough to maybe move acceptance?
I do. I'll move this item.
I'll second it. So it's been moved by West Hollywood and seconded by Santa Monica. Does anybody have any other questions or comments before we go to a vote? Okay, would you please call the roll?
Beverly Hills,
Yes.
Culver City,
Yes.
Santa Monica,
Yes.
and West Hollywood.
Yes.
All right, so that after many iterations through the COG is now accepted and approved by a unanimous vote of all the members present. And that takes us to our last action item, and that's 5E. This is one I know something about. The Bayona wetlands are an important resource to the west side, an environmental area, but also they can be a recreational and educational area. They're under the jurisdiction right now of the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And particularly during COVID, there hasn't been much demand for access to that land. Now that COVID is lifting, public access to that land for educational, recreational, and inspirational purposes becomes more important. And the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission talks about Ballona quite a bit. And there's currently a resolution proposed from that commission, on which we have a seat that I've been in, to urge the Department of Fish and Wildlife to reopen, actually, it's been open in the past, reopen that area for some controlled public use. That resolution requires the support of constituencies. We're one of them. So we're being asked today to vote on a letter supporting a resolution that is in the packet. Is there any other procedural part of that, Cecilia, that I'm missing, or does that pretty well cover what it is?
That covers it. And so authorization from the board would enable us to submit the letter that's part of your board packet on page 59 and put ourselves on the record as wanting to have this enhanced access.
And as the one who got this to this point, it'll be carried forward at the next meeting of the commission by Mayor Fish. I will move that we approve the letter about the public access.
And I'll second. Bob Wonderlich from Beverly Hills.
Okay, so it's been moved by Santa Monica, seconded by Beverly Hills. Are there any questions or discussion? Winnie, a roll call, please.
Beverly Hills,
Yes.
Culver City,
Yes.
Santa Monica,
Yes.
and West Hollywood.
Yes.
Okay, so that goes forward by unanimous vote of the members present, and that takes care of our action items for today. We still have quite a bit on the agenda, but it's mostly updates and information. And we'll start with updates and information on transportation. We have a presentation, or at least some information about autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, I'm going to go quickly. Just you'll note on page 60 of your staff report of your board packet, just a roll-up of a presentation and a discussion that the Transportation Working Group had about what the various cities have been doing around autonomous vehicle technology. It's impressive what our cities are doing. And so we wanted to make sure folks were aware of what's going on across the sub-region. This might be an interesting area for collaboration and coordination going forward in the year ahead. So this is just an information item. All the information is there on page 60. And we'd be happy to continue those conversations and see if there might be a project in there to coordinate.
Yeah, speaking for Santa Monica, we began a small-scale pilot project of robot deliveries from restaurants, and we anticipated that pilot going on for a while. It was so wildly popular that we were pressured to extend it citywide. So there is interest in this, and people are really, rethinking what it means, what access is, what mobility is. Are there any other quick comments from other jurisdictions about the projects that you have listed in that report that you'd like to point us to? If not, we could just, I assume this is a receive and file situation.
That's correct.
Do we need a vote to receive and file, or is that just done?
Nope, it's just done.
Well, thank you for that information. I think that's a fascinating field. I know that Councilmember Mirisch from Beverly Hills had great interest in that when he was on the COG, and I think we're all going to be dealing with not only the benefits, but some of the side effects of different types of mobility in our cities. And by the way, I don't think Francie Steffen was on this call earlier when we talked about her also retiring from the city of Santa Monica. She is now. And Francie, I just want to say you have been a wonderful resource, and I really appreciate all the work you've done on transportation before we move on here to housing and homelessness, which is item 7. We have 4 different reports here. Let's start with that housing element one.
I'm just going to pass it off to Winnie to take on all the housing and homelessness items.
Thank you. I will also be very quick. So as you heard from Mayan about the housing elements, they are due on October 15th. In the packet, there is a letter from SCCOG, which requests some flexibilities on the housing elements. Sorry, my dog is barking. So one of them is extending the October 15 deadline, in which I spoke with your cities in support of that. They are all on track to submit the housing element in October, but just to give them some breathing room to make sure that we have meaningful community engagement. The letter is also in the packet. Also for the REAP application, we do have our scope of work listed in the packet. And we will be working with SCCOG on the procurement process and select a team for their bench of consultants. So that is coming up. And with the evictiontorium signed by SB 91 earlier this year, it is set to expire at the end of the month. So we've also spoke with your cities, and we've submitted a letter to our legislators to extend the eviction moratorium. And lastly, from the County Homeless Initiative, we will be receiving some additional funding beginning 2022 or 2020, two. And those are the updates.
So we covered all four of them, 7A through D. Are there any questions? We'll move on to our agenda item 8, which is legislation. And I think Jeff is here somewhere to give us the update from the league.
I am here. I hope my internet connection holds out. I just want to talk briefly about my report that's already in your agenda packet. There were, on the priority bill list, there were some significant legislative deadlines over the past 2 weeks. 2 of those bills have fallen off, one bill that we supported and one bill that we opposed. They're toward the end, but SB 426 Rubio is no longer moving forward. It's a 2-year bill. And then SB 342 Gonzalez that we opposed is also not moving forward. It's a 2-year bill. Just a quick mention of the state budget. That deadline for the main budget bill is the 15th, next Tuesday. We're seeing, especially because of the one-time influx of funds that the state saw, plus all the federal money, this budget year has been particularly not transparent. We haven't got a lot of information. There haven't been a lot of public meetings about what's going to be in the budget. So we're hoping to get more information in some of that debate that takes place next week. But we do expect that the budget trailer bills, those bills that actually enact the budget and sort of spend things on specific projects, will still be trickling out for the next few months. So I would expect that our $10 billion budget ask, which includes that $2 billion for cities that saw the net loss even after the American Rescue Plan Act funds, those types of things, that will continue to sort of be something we need to continue to remind our legislators that we're still looking for. And I'm going to also, just so everyone has the information close at hand, I'm going to drop in the American Rescue Plan Act fund totals for the West Side in the chat. Those numbers came out for the non-entitlement cities just last Friday, and you may have missed it when I sent it out over the weekend. So hopefully you've seen it now, and the West Side is going to, without the city of Los Angeles, stands to get more than $54 million. So it's certainly good news. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Do we have any for Jeff? Anybody? I don't see any. So thank you. Thank you for the information. And the next part of this 8B, I announced at the beginning of this meeting that, because of COVID, we're meeting online. There's certain requirements for that. Public input is taken by phone. And this is all under a government order that the governor issued at the beginning of the COVID epidemic, which is going to transition out. And in the packet, there is a letter about that, letting us know that it's not going to be a pulling of the plug on June 15th. There will be some kind of transition. Cecilia, do you have plans for how these COG meetings will be conducted for the next couple of meetings?
Well, we'd like to work with the incoming chair to talk about how she would like to handle it. But, our recommendation is, if folks feel comfortable, we could meet technically in person in August if everybody feels like in their comfortable way. But what we would really like to do is still continue to have a hybrid approach to public comment. We found that it's really been helpful in this arena, and in a lot of other public forums, we get more participation by the public often. If they can tie in, they don't have to drive somewhere, they can actually tie in by Zoom. So we're happy to work with the incoming chair on how to structure this meeting. But we could probably go in person in August. It's really about the level of comfort that folks have. We could also carry that on. We could do a virtual meeting in August if it was amenable to this group as well. So we will follow your lead, but we do think it would be helpful to have a hybrid public comment approach.
And Lauren, you'll be talking with Cecilia about that and letting the other COG members know as we go forward.
Absolutely.
Great. Just so we know, it's not a quick pulling of the plug on June 15th. Which
No, it's not a flipping of the switch, and we really appreciate that from the governor. I know a lot of public agencies were quite worried about that.
So as we move on to announcements, item 9 on the agenda, that's a great segue for me with an announcement from Santa Monica. As we learned through COVID that public input in these public meetings was actually enhanced by allowing it to happen online, COVID forced us to allow many of our restaurants to operate outdoors, at least temporarily, because they couldn't continue to do business indoors. And in Santa Monica, we streamlined all the permits. Outdoor dining was hugely successful. And rather than pull back, we've actually decided to close down Main Street in Santa Monica on weekends on a pilot project to pedestrianize the street and have it be open for outdoor dining. And many cities in Europe have this, and it's tremendously successful. With our climate and being by the beach, we think it'll work in Santa Monica as well. So that is one thing that we have going in Santa Monica that I would invite you all to come enjoy this summer, would be a pedestrianized Main Street and outdoor dining. Other cities have announcements? West Hollywood.
Yes, I want to wish everyone a happy Pride and let you know that although every day is a Pride in the city of West Hollywood, we do have One City, One Pride virtually online, mostly the events through June 30th. And we also have Pride Lives Here. Those dates will be June 25th through June 27th. And you can find out about all the events, some virtual programming, and then of course our businesses and our restaurants. And we have a lot of out zones ourselves at the WeHo Pride. And we're very excited about it. And our hashtag is WeHo Pride 21. Thank you.
Beverly Hills or Culver City, what's up?
Well, sure. We lit up City Hall to celebrate Pride Month as well. So you can stop by and see our City Hall lit up for it. And just this morning, we were having a discussion with some of our small businesses about the potential for pilots that would involve closing streets or closing portions of streets to build on the outdoor dining that we already have in place.
And Mayor Fish?
So I'll keep with the theme. We're going to have a semi-informal pride ride in Culver City on bicycles, scooters, whatever means of mobility, non-car that you prefer, on June 27th. If anybody wants to drop by and ride around with us.
Great. Well, thank you all for the information. Our next meeting will be on August 12th. Do any COG members have items they would like to see placed on that or future agendas so the staff can be working on that? I don't see any. So let's now turn to the other people in the room and any phone-in public comments before we adjourn. Do we have anybody who'd like to speak? I see Mr. Kerpels.
Josh, you're not coming through.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Hi, everyone. Josh Kerpes from Assemblymember Bloom's office. I just wanted to kind of build on what Mr. Kinner was saying from the league about the budget. Wanted to give you a little bit more information. Again, there aren't a lot of details. Those details will come after June 15th, as most years. For many years, we do that. We do the details after June 15th, but this year, especially because of the lateness in getting all their tax revenue information. But wanted to let you know that a broadband, the legislative version of the budget proposal has $7 billion in that for broadband. Transportation, $3 billion for funding transportation infrastructure across the state. $2 billion for streets, roads, and highways. And $400 million for state and local transportation adaptation programs. In terms of affordable housing, we've got $1.75 billion to alleviate the backlog in affordable housing construction, $300 million for preservation of existing affordable housing, $130 million for the development, maintenance, and preservation of farm worker housing, and $750 million for planning and implementation of grants to help local communities. In the homelessness package, record level, they basically provide $8.5 billion in new funding for homeless programs over the next 2 years. That's record level investments. And then also including $1 billion in ongoing support for local governments to address homelessness. This is the first ongoing commitment the state has made on this issue. And so it shows how important this is to the state to address this issue. It'll also have a lot of strong oversight and accountability attached to that $1 billion. And then all told, the updated legislative version of the budget comes out to $267.1 billion, of which 196.1 is the general fund, and then a total general fund reserves equaling about 25.2 billion. So we've been very fortunate with the $76 billion surplus we have this year. So we're moving ahead with that, but we will get more details after June 15th when they figure those out, and there'll be hearings for that to get your input. And then I just want to conclude with, I wanted to say how on behalf of the Assembly member and all of our offices been able to work with Councilmember McCune over the years. Thank you for your service to both the City Council and here at the COG. And we wish you the best in your retirement.
Well, thank you for that. Are there any other public comments today? Well, seeing none, I will issue to Mayor Pro Tem Meister the chair's on-time challenge. It's 1:15 and we are adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Kevin, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Kevin. We'll miss you.